Now, as the new reality sets in and the coalition prepares for a term in opposition, so too begins their own introspection of the campaign and defeat, as I mentioned. The Liberal Party has to stand for something and they have to evolve. So, for his analysis on what's been a big week in Australian news and his thoughts on the future of the Liberal Party, I'm joined now by 2GB broadcaster in Sydney, our mate Michael McLaren. Michael, welcome. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks, Chris.
Gee, I've heard an extreme array of views about going to the left a lot more, but going to the right a lot more, about changing this policy, not changing any policy, playing small target, be bold and brave. I'm confused. What are your listeners telling you about what the Liberal Party has to do?
Well, it was interesting. I did the show immediately after the election. So Sunday morning, we got the initial analysis from right around the country, Melbourne, Adelaide, Brisbane, Sydney, Canberra, everywhere. And depending on the city, the pulse was different. There's no doubt about it. But I think what you were saying earlier in your editorial about the Liberal Party needing to have some policies which they can sell, not just to the base, to energise them, but also to convince people that might waver that they have a plan to deal with the policies that they claim. Climate change, nuclear power is the obvious one. So they looked their best in that last week when they had the tinkering with super policy to do with housing. All of a sudden, there seemed to be some meat on the bone. There'd been a lot of talk from everyone about, housing affordability. Here was a plan that could make it happen for a lot of people.
7 days before we went to vote.
But it was too late.
Yeah.
And the same with the net zero by 2050. Everyone seems to be politically, not in the voting world, but politically everyone's in favour of this. No one, though, has laid out the pathway how it can practically be done whilst all these lights stay on. Well, nuclear surely should be considered. At least the moratorium's got to go. They could have put that out there, wedged Labor, wedged the Greens, and really then had a good ding-dong about policy. But they didn't do it, they squibbed it. And the reason, as you know, was they said, well, we wouldn't have bipartisan support. Well, John Howard didn't have bipartisan support for the GST. Tony Abbott didn't have bipartisan support for Operation Sovereign Borders. Labor didn't have bipartisan support for compulsory super or for Medicare. They've all been big reforms. They convinced the public. They prosecuted the case. Sadly, under Scott Morrison, the Liberals squibbed it.
OK, so we've got the Liberals brooding, as they would, as they have every reason to.
Yeah.
The smile on the faces of the five ministers running the country is very Cheshire-like.
Yeah.
They have reason to be. What are your thoughts on what's happened in the past 5 days?
They've started well. I'm not going to criticise Labor for the sake of criticising Labor. They've been doing, I think, what conservative people like you or I would expect any Australian government to do on foreign affairs. The Bill Wheeler case, well, that'll divide people, but so be it. But as for what's about to come, that's the challenge.
Yeah.
The global economy is in a lot of strife. Ours is catching up to that mess that we're seeing in Northern Europe, the Northern Hemisphere. There is probably going to be a massive push for boats because there will be people starving in the Horn of Africa, the subcontinent, in a matter of weeks because Ukraine's wheat exports, the breadbasket of Europe, is blocked. And so these will be geopolitical tensions and pressures that will inevitably be impacting us.
So it's fair to say that by the end of the year, we will have cost of living out of space. Yeah. We will have petrol prices back to where basically they were threatening to be before.
They're there now.
Josh Frydenberg intervened. And we'll have boats arriving in some parts of our nation, maybe even our west coast.
Most probably.
How does he handle that?
Well, this is the problem. You go to the election saying, vote for me, and if you've got a grievance, no matter how big or small, we'll tickle it with some government revenue. Then, as we've seen in the first 5 days, Jim Chalmers, when he's not on the phone, is setting expectation boundaries, immediately saying, well, look, we've got in and lo and behold, the cupboard's bare. Well, everyone knew it was. And so, look, the promises we took to the election, we can probably meet those, but any extra support, can't do. Sorry, Pontius
You'll be backtracking very quickly, you're right.
But the pressure, and not just from voters, from industry, because they're seeing their power prices go up 4 times what they're normally paying for gas. And so industry will be knocking on the door saying, we need a handout, otherwise we're going broke. Households will be saying, we need more support. Look what they did last night in the UK.
Yeah.
Billions of pounds of cash, more cash. Now, there'll be pressure here to do it. And then, as you say, there may well be boats. I'm not saying they're going to let them in, but they'll be knocking at the door most probably, and I can understand why. But all of this will be happening, and that's going to test a new government.
Yeah. Not to mention the noise that will come out of the mouths of the 10 green stroke teal independents who will demand further action than what they're getting from Labor already.
It's a lovely teal tie, by the way, Chris. But
That's a mistake. That's a mistake. I don't choose them.
No, it's beautiful. I think the pressure from the Greens won't be in the lower house. Labor will probably get their 76 and they can do a deal with someone to get the Speaker. They can keep the majority. The pressure will be in the Senate.
Yeah.
You're going to have 12 Greens, probably David Pocock. They're all similarly ideologically aligned. Labor will use them to get things through, but everyone knows the Liberals have to do deals with the Nationals outside of their comfort zone. Labor will have to do deals with the Greens. It's what will they do the deals on? And I don't think the Liberals will be back in government in 3 years, but Peter Dutton will have to try to position them, as Abbott did, to be within striking distance for the next election after that. And if the deals are in the wrong areas between the Greens and Labor, that's the wedge the Liberals will use.
Michael McLaren, thank you very much for your insight.
Thanks, Chris.
Good on you.